Ma'am, she can't board first class speaking like that. Elodie froze mid-step, her tiny hand still holding the boarding pass that had her name printed clearly. Elodie Sinclair, first class, Raleigh to LAX. She turned to the agent's voice, sharp, dismissive. The woman behind the counter, a flight crew member with a neatly knotted scarf and a heavy layer of lipstick, was now pointing not at Elodie's pass, but at Elodie herself. She just said, "Bonjour" and "pardon" to me like we're boarding Air France. The agent scoffed. "That's not an American accent, little girl." "Who coached her?" Passengers nearby started to glance over. Irene, Elodie's mother, stepped forward calmly, her face hardening just slightly. "She didn't coach anything," Irene said, her voice firm but controlled. "That's how she speaks. She's bilingual." The agent smirked. "Well, that's cute, but we don't have time for games. I need a parent or guardian at the counter. Real documents. This doesn't look legit." Elodie's face flushed red. Her accent wasn't fake. It was hers. A soft, lilting mix from years growing up splitting time between the US and a French research station in Martinique where her mom had worked. She wasn't pretending, but the woman had made her sound like a fraud. "Tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever been judged just for the way you speak?" "I can show you her documentation," Irene said, calmly handing over Elodie's passport and travel ID. "She's American, born in Raleigh, top of her class. And yes, she speaks French, Spanish, and a bit of Mandarin." The agent didn't even look at the documents. She leaned slightly toward Elodie instead and said loudly enough for others to hear, "Well, she sure doesn't sound like she belongs in first class." That was it. The people in line behind them went quiet. Elodie blinked hard. Her lower lip trembled but didn't fall. She didn't speak. Not one word. The silence hurt more than the words. Back at the gate seating area, Irene and Elodie sat without speaking for several minutes. Irene gently held her daughter's hand, but Elodie didn't look up from her lap. She wasn't crying, but her expression had gone vacant, like she had disappeared inward. "What did she mean?" Elodie asked finally. Her voice was small. "Do I really sound wrong?" Irene took a deep breath. "No, baby. You sound like someone who's been exposed to the world. That's power. Don't let someone small make you feel smaller." But Elodie wasn't convinced. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe being different wasn't a good thing. By the time they boarded the flight, the agent's attitude had shifted, likely because another staffer had come over and reviewed the documents. But the damage was done. The agent still offered a passive-aggressive smile, saying, "Oh, you made it after all. I guess Little Miss Fancy Voice can fly first." Elodie didn't respond. She just walked down the jet bridge and kept her head down. As she took her first-class seat, she noticed something. Across the aisle, a white boy no older than her was slurping a soda and bouncing loudly in his seat. No one batted an eye. No one called his behavior not first class. But she, because she said bonjour and had a gentle foreign-tinged accent, was treated like an imposter. It hit her differently, not with rage, but with something colder, a sense that this wasn't about her. Not really. It was about systems that pretended to be fair but weren't. And maybe, just maybe, those systems needed to be tested. When the flight took off, Elodie didn't sleep. She just stared out the window. In her head, lines of code started forming. Not revenge, not punishment. A framework. Something that would force people, and the airlines, to treat accents like hers with the dignity they deserved. That night, she opened her laptop mid-flight and logged into something the agent could never access. The beta portal of Skyscan Ethics Index, a platform she'd co-developed, one with back-end access to real-time behavioral data of crew across 21 airports. And right now, she was adding one name. At exactly 9:17 a.m. Pacific Time, a red-coded alert blinked across the compliance dashboard at Coleman Global's Boston headquarters. It didn't come from a human. It came from a device, a wristband. And not just any wristband, It carried a Sinclair clearance tag, a legacy-level code that only 2 people in the world had ever been authorized to use. One of them, Dr. Helena Sinclair, had passed away 6 months ago. The other was her daughter, a quiet 13-year-old girl who, moments ago, had been humiliated at Gate 24 in LAX for speaking too slowly and not fitting the airline's first-class image. Boston, MA, Coleman Global Travel HQ. Harold Min, VP of Strategic Risk and Partnerships, stared at the blinking alert on his monitor, speechless. His coffee sat untouched, cooling. Level 2 protocol initiated, the system read. No background music, no dramatic zoom, just a grainy clip from a phone leaning on someone's carry-on, quietly capturing Elodie sitting beside a vending machine. Her hands folded, her lips sealed, her expression unreadable. The only movement was a soft red glow blinking once on her SkyScan wristband, then fading. That was all. Within 15 minutes, the clip hit TikTok. The comments came fast and sharp. "She's not throwing a fit," one user wrote. "That's not fear, that's control." Another, "Is that Elodie Sinclair? She looks just like her mother." And then the hashtags exploded. Gate 24, #Sky silenced, #Elodie speaks. The internet, for once, wasn't screaming in outrage. It was whispering in awe. Whispering about the little girl who didn't speak, but somehow shook an entire airport terminal. Reddit threads popped up with timestamp analyses. People shared footage of the agent, Chloe Patterson, mocking Elodie's speech. A 4K zoom caught the flick of Chloe's wrist, that smirk just before she snapped, "You sound like a glitch," then walked away. Screenshots flew across platforms, customer service logs, boarding delay reports, even a leaked Sky Nova Slack message that said, "Shut it down, Sinclair kids involved." Elodie didn't post anything, didn't retweet, didn't record a teary message or call for justice. She just watched. Back in Boston, she was curled up on her mother's old desk chair, legs folded, sipping mint tea. Irene watched her over the rim of her glasses, thumbing through printed ethics memos from the FAA. "They think you engineered it," Irene said, not looking up. "I didn't," Elodie replied. "No, but they also know you're the only one with access to your mom's legacy override keys." Elodie shrugged, not confirming or denying. Just sipped her tea again, quieter this time. In Dallas, board members at Delta Sky were having a very different kind of tea. Boiling hot PR crisis. Their general counsel stood pale-faced at the head of the room. "This isn't just a reputation hiccup. FAA sent formal notice. They're opening a review." An executive scoffed. "Over a girl?" "She's not just a girl," someone whispered. Another replied, "She's Helena Sinclair's daughter." That changed the air in the room. Within 4 hours, Delta Sky stock dipped 11.9%. Institutional investors sent anxious messages. 2 hedge funds moved to suspend holdings. A travel loyalty network issued a statement. CNN queued up an interview with a former FAA official. MSNBC launched a segment, "Digital Ethics and the Next Generation, the Elodie Effect." By sunset, Gate 24 was a ghost zone. Chloe Patterson stood there, manila envelope in hand, waiting for a security escort. No badge, no headset, no eye contact from her supervisor, just a curt, "You've been pulled." She turned her phone on. Notifications poured in. Her face, her voice, her mocking tone, looped across social media like a hall of mirrors. Comment after comment. She mocked a child for how she talks. She said, "You don't belong in first class," like she owned the sky. She called a Sinclair a glitch. She's done. Chloe scrolled until her fingers trembled, then turned off the phone. It was already too late. Meanwhile, the FAA Ethics Task Force convened virtually. One by one, panelists reviewed logs from Skytrack. One senior officer leaned forward. "This is the first documented Tier 1 passenger ethics trigger initiated by a minor. Another replied, "But she's authorized. Legacy protocol under Helena Sinclair's provisions. The daughter holds emergency rights." A pause. This could change everything. Elodie didn't care about the headlines or the analysis. Instead, she pulled out a notebook from her drawer, same one her mother used to carry. She wrote a short paragraph in neat, deliberate print. Irene peeked in and asked, "Want to see what they're saying about you?" "No." "Then what are you writing?" Elodie tore out the page and handed it to her grandmother. It read, "You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You just need to speak through the right system." Irene smiled with a tear in her eye. That quote, quietly posted by an anonymous user to the Arsky Ethics subreddit, went viral in 7 minutes. It was screen-printed onto protest signs, spliced into spoken-word poetry, shared by disability advocates and tech activists. Someone even tattooed the phrase on their forearm. By midnight, Elodie's name wasn't trending for being a victim. It was trending for changing the rules without saying a word. And the airline? They had just realized this wasn't about PR anymore. It was about power, silent, systemic, and irreversible. Elodie didn't ask to go back to LAX. She didn't say she was ready, but the world had already moved. By Wednesday morning, Irene found a letter slipped under their door at the Sinclair brownstone. It was from the Department of Transportation, stamped, official, with a small gold seal shaped like a compass rose. Inside was an invitation, a formal request for Elodie to attend a listening session with the FAA's Civilian Ethics Board as an observer with expertise in digital passenger equity systems. Irene let out a sharp breath. "Expertise?" she whispered. "She's 13. Elodie sat in the kitchen, quietly watching the steam rise from her tea. "They don't care about my age," she finally said. "They care I didn't scream." Irene didn't argue. The flight back to Los Angeles was silent. No drama, no gate agent giving them trouble. Just a smooth, upgraded seat and too many curious eyes from fellow passengers. Elodie wore her mother's blazer, navy, sharp-shouldered, slightly too big for her frame. The gold button at the sleeve was loose. Irene offered to fix it, but Elodie refused. "She never fixed it either," she said, running her fingers along the thread. At LAX, they were met by a federal protocol assistant who looked barely older than a college student, flustered but polite. He escorted them through a discreet corridor near Gate 30, away from press and passengers. Elodie's fingers tensed when they passed Gate 24. She didn't say anything, just looked at the floor, where the tiles changed slightly, from gray to speckled cream. She knew the exact spot where Chloe had stood. The assistant opened a side door. "Right this way," he said gently. Inside was a low-lit conference room with tall windows and leather chairs that looked too heavy for such a light space. Around the table sat 10 people, legal advisors, equity monitors, ethics compliance officers, and across from them, surprisingly, was someone Elodie recognized. Naomi Sinclair, her aunt, her mother's younger sister. She hadn't seen her in nearly 4 years. Naomi looked up from her tablet. Her gaze was unreadable. Stern, maybe, but not unkind. "Elodie," she said simply, and then nodded. No hug, no dramatic reunion, but something settled into place. The meeting began. For most of it, Elodie listened. There were words like compliance protocol, real-time index deviation, and public sentiment liability. One board member whispered that Skynova's operational clearance could be suspended for another 48 hours if the ethics score didn't normalize. Then came the question that changed the tone. Who triggered the override? The room fell silent. No one wanted to admit it, but Elodie raised her hand. "I did," she said. A few jaws dropped. Someone cleared their throat. "You?" a senior official asked. "On what authority?" Elodie slid her wristband across the table. "Legacy biometric, emergency clearance, Helena Sinclair, level 1L. Naomi nodded slowly. "It's valid." I co-wrote that clause. The board murmured. Documents were pulled up. Legal precedent cited. For the next 20 minutes, the room spun in 1,000 directions. But Elodie stayed still, only speaking once more when someone asked what her intention had been. "I didn't want to punish anyone," she said. "I just didn't want it to happen again." That landed heavier than any lecture. When the session ended, a tall man in a Navy FAA badge approached Elodie in the hallway. "You're calm," he said, almost like an accusation. "I'm used to being misunderstood," she replied. He scratched his head. "Your mother would have been proud, I think. She would have told me to check the secondary compliance log first," Elodie said dryly. Irene laughed from behind her. As they left the airport, the press had gathered outside. Not a mob, but enough to draw a few security guards closer. Someone shouted, "Elodie, what did you say in there?" She didn't stop, but Irene whispered, "Do you want to say anything?" Elodie paused, then turned. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her hand or wave for cameras. She simply said, "I asked them to listen." And somehow, that one sentence went more viral than anything before. That night, back in the hotel room, Elodie sat cross-legged on the bed while Naomi and Irene spoke quietly near the window. Naomi explained that the Passenger Ethics Accord, the very draft Helena had written years ago, was finally being fast-tracked. Elodie's quiet trigger had done what no formal proposal ever could. 3 international airports had already reached out, asking for access to the Skyscan Index. A member of parliament from the UK requested a review of passenger protection laws. And in Japan, a viral clip dubbed Elodie's story in multiple languages. Still, Elodie wasn't celebrating. She stared out the window at the LAX runway, glowing in quiet orange light. She didn't want applause, Elodie said softly. She wanted systems. Irene walked over. "And you gave her that." Elodie shook her head. "I just reminded people what she built." Later that week, a press release went out. Quiet, factual, and stunning. Passenger Ethics Accord, PEA, to be implemented as mandatory standard for all FAA-certified airlines starting fiscal Q2. Drafted by Helena Sinclair. Endorsed by Naomi Sinclair. Activated by Elodie Sinclair. It was the kind of symmetry no one could have planned, and no PR agency could have written better. And yet, Elodie didn't post about it. She didn't attend interviews. She turned off her notifications and deleted the media folder with every article bearing her name. Instead, she went home, opened her mother's old codebook, and quietly began reviewing line by line. Not for validation, but because systems don't stay ethical just by being triggered once. They have to be watched, tended, guarded. And no one, it seemed, understood that better than the girl who never needed to shout to be heard. It started with a flight to Seattle. Nothing big. Just a corporate training event at SeaTac for mid-tier flight supervisors, scheduled 3 months prior. But when the itinerary arrived in the inboxes of 6 SkyNova managers, something strange caught their attention. A note attached in red. Training status, pending ethics score compliance. PEA verified. None of them had seen that before. Within hours, inboxes across the airline's corporate offices lit up. Legal teams scrambled. "What the hell is PEA verified?" someone asked in the internal Slack channel. No one had an answer, but Elodie knew. So did Naomi. And so did every FAA official who'd signed off quietly just days earlier. The Passenger Ethics Accord, or PEA, had gone live. Without a press conference, without a ribbon cutting, without even a CEO in sight. It was embedded in the code. A soft launch through a scheduled system update that hit every FAA-certified airline's compliance protocol overnight, just like Helena had designed it. By 10 a.m., a compliance officer at SkyNova's Toronto office flagged the airline's ethics score. It had dropped. Hard. The Skyscan Index, the silent real-time scoring system that Elodie had activated, had finally updated its public-facing dashboard. What had once been private was now exposed for all internal teams to see. Skynova's score, non-compliant red, blinking, unignorable. Within 24 hours, 5 regional airports temporarily suspended Skynova's fast-lane boarding partnerships. 2 international booking platforms removed their premium tier listings for the airline. 3 corporate travel agencies halted bookings under their Ethics-Verified Preferred Carriers program. The fallout came not like a thunderclap, but like an avalanche. Quiet at first, then relentless. The most unexpected part? No one blamed Elodie. In fact, her name wasn't even in the system. Instead, whispers of legacy override and Sinclair compliance lineage spread across ethics forums, legal discussion panels, and transportation policy circles. No one had seen it coming. And now, no one knew how to undo it. Meanwhile, Irene tried to keep things normal at home. She made Elodie oatmeal in the mornings, like always. But Elodie hardly touched it. She spent most of her time rereading old notebooks, her mother's field notes from when she first developed the ethics index. "I don't think Mom meant for it to go this far," Elodie said one night. Irene sat beside her. "She meant for it to work, and now it does. But people are losing contracts, jobs." Irene reached over and gently closed the notebook. "Elodie," she said, "systems don't hurt people. Choices do." Back in Los Angeles, chaos quietly spread through Skynova's executive floor. Chloe Walters, the former agent who had triggered the original incident, had been publicly suspended, yes. But the internal damage she caused wasn't limited to a gate or a girl. She had triggered an industry protocol. Now, Skynova's legal team was forced to submit a retroactive ethics remediation plan to retain their access to federal routes. And it had to be approved by a board now partially advised by Naomi Sinclair. For the first time in decades, airline executives were no longer negotiating with other executives. They were answering to a child's silence and the system her mother built. At a transportation policy roundtable in D.C., one moderator asked, "Should minors have the right to activate aviation compliance triggers?" A panelist responded, "Should a grown adult have the right to ridicule a child for how she speaks?" The room fell silent. That clip made it to TikTok. It was stitched, subtitled, and translated into 8 languages. Elodie saw it. She didn't repost it. She just saved it to her folder named Mom's Echo. On a rainy Thursday, a quiet knock came at the Sinclair door. Irene opened it to find a package, hand-delivered. Inside was a single sheet of paper, framed. It was Skynova's official letter of compliance acknowledgement. They had signed the Passenger Ethics Accord. At the bottom, barely noticeable, was a small seal, embossed in silver, approved by the Skyscan Index, ethics score, compliant. The letter was addressed not to Helena, not to Naomi, not even to Irene. It was addressed to Miss Elodie Sinclair. Elodie held the frame in her lap. She didn't smile, didn't cry. She just whispered, "About time." Later that evening, Naomi called. "I just got word," she said. 4 other airlines are applying to join the Accord this month. This is moving faster than we planned." Elodie nodded. "It's not about speed. It's about staying watched." Naomi paused. "You sound like your mother." Elodie didn't respond. She wasn't trying to sound like anyone. She just knew. When the world refuses to listen to voices like hers, systems had to do the speaking. The sun peeked through the clouds like it wasn't sure if it was allowed. Elodie stood at the top of the marble steps outside the Air Ethics Summit in Washington, D.C. Her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her satchel, the one she'd carried since 6th grade. Irene had tried to get her to wear something a bit more official, but Elodie had refused. She didn't need a costume to matter. She wasn't here as a symbol. She was here because she worked. Inside the Federal Aviation Forum Hall, people were still arriving, policymakers, industry regulators, CEOs in dark suits and navy ties, lawyers with silver hair and tired smiles. But none of them mattered more than the document waiting on the stage. The final draft of the Passenger Ethics Accord, now due for vote. The public didn't know this part. They saw headlines, hashtags, TikToks. They didn't see the all-nighters Naomi had pulled getting regulators aligned, or the meetings Irene sat through with ethics boards explaining why the accord needed a child access clause, or the security reviews verifying Helena Sinclair's original Skyscan algorithm, ensuring that the system Elodie had triggered hadn't just worked, but worked clean. That morning, the FAA panel finally ruled. The override Elodie executed was legal, intentional, and valid under legacy credentials. And now came the reckoning. Naomi walked in beside Elodie, whispering, "The room's heavy. Brace yourself." "I'm always braced," Elodie replied. They entered. The hall was quiet, too quiet for a room that housed over 700 power players. But Elodie didn't flinch. Not when she spotted the Sky Nova General Counsel glaring from the third row. Not when she saw the woman from Empire Air checking her phone, probably messaging damage control. Elodie took her seat, center stage, far left. The place reserved for a non-voting observer. But the truth was, no one else in the room had triggered more change than her. The chairperson, a stern man from the Transportation Ethics Board, tapped his gavel. "We're here to finalize the Passenger Ethics Accord," he said. "One document, 7 mandates, and if ratified, one enforceable standard for all U.S. airlines by end of fiscal year." He paused. "Before we proceed, Miss Elodie Sinclair has requested to read a brief statement." Every head turned, every breath held. Elodie stood, walked up to the podium, and didn't unfold a piece of paper. She pulled out her mother's old notebook instead. She flipped to a marked page, cleared her throat. "My mom wrote this in 2014, she began. She called it a soft future, a world where we don't wait for passengers to sue or for headlines to shame us, a world where systems catch disrespect before it becomes injury." She looked up. She said, "If someone isn't being heard, the infrastructure should lean closer." No one blinked. Elodie closed the notebook. "I didn't speak to shame anyone," she said. "I activated the system because I was tired of being made into a glitch. I'm not a glitch, I'm a guest, and I deserve dignity, not just when it's convenient." Silence. Then the chair nodded. "Thank you, Miss Sinclair. Your statement will be entered into the federal record." She returned to her seat. Naomi squeezed her hand. Behind them, murmurs began. Not the gossipy kind. The tectonic shift kind. The kind that said, "We can't ignore this anymore." The vote proceeded. By law, the FAA couldn't vote for the accord. They could only enforce it once enough airlines signed. So, one by one, CEOs were called. Sky Nova abstained. Empire Air declined, citing legal review. Right Skies signed, with an asterisk requiring 6 months onboarding. Atlas Global signed immediately, no conditions. More came, 14 in total. By the end of the afternoon, 9 airlines signed. That triggered the FAA's compliance clause, requiring all remaining carriers to comply or risk losing federal certifications for domestic routes. It was done. The Passenger Ethics Accord was now a binding standard. But Elodie wasn't smiling, because Chloe was still out there, uncorrected. That evening, in the quiet of a hotel room Naomi had booked near the Capitol, Irene scrolled through updates. "Elodie," she said softly, "you're trending again." Elodie raised an eyebrow. "They're calling you the quiet architect." Elodie laughed, once. "That's dumb. I didn't architect anything." "You did," Irene said. "You restored something. That's harder." A knock interrupted them. Naomi opened the door. It was a messenger from Sky Nova's legal team. He handed Irene an envelope. She opened it and read in silence. Then she turned to Elodie. "It's a personal apology from the acting CEO. They've revoked Chloe's employment permanently." Elodie didn't respond. "They're offering to fund a new ethics training initiative," Naomi added. "In your name. Optional." Elodie shook her head. It shouldn't have my name on it. Naomi smiled. Then whose? Elodie stood and walked to the window, looked out at the dome of the Capitol. Call it Helena, she whispered. That week, dozens of airlines updated their internal policies. 3 rewrote their onboarding. One major alliance added the Sky Ethics Verified badge to its route maps. And in one airport, Gate 24, exactly where it all began, a new plaque was installed. In honor of every voice that wasn't heard loud enough to be respected. Ethics isn't volume, it's vigilance. The Sinclair Standard. Elodie didn't think much of the morning at first. It started quiet, too quiet for a house that had just rewritten airline history. Naomi had gone back to DC to attend the follow-up ethics panel. Irene was still asleep, and the only thing Elodie could hear was the gentle stir of tree branches outside the window. But that silence didn't last. It started with a ping, then another, and then a vibration so persistent it nearly knocked her phone off the nightstand. She rolled over, blinking at the screen. 17 unread messages, from people she hadn't heard from in years. A cousin she hadn't spoken to since 4th grade. A coding friend from STEM camp. Even Mr. Donaldson, the school principal. What's going on? You see the news yet? They did... What? At Sky Nova. Elodie rubbed her eyes and unlocked the phone. And there it was. Front page. Not just the aviation blogs, but the Times, CNN, BBC, even Kotaku for some weird reason. Sky Nova leaked memo reveals coordinated passenger tiering program. Ethics scores by race, age, disability. She stared. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't just about Chloe anymore. This wasn't even about Gate 24. This was a system. A buried, quiet, calculated system that had been running for years, and someone had just blown it wide open. She read further. The memo had been leaked anonymously, someone inside Sky Nova, apparently appalled at how internal behavior scores had been correlated with race, disability status, language proficiency, and even accent clarity. Passengers had been flagged as disruptive risk factors based on how easy they were to handle, or rather, how easy they were to dismiss. And it all fed into Sky Nova's old HarmonyNet, a behavioral analytics platform no longer publicly mentioned since 2022. But internally, it never went offline. It had just been renamed. Elodie sat still. She read the article again, and when her hands stopped shaking, she picked up her phone and called Naomi. 3 hours later, Elodie was in a secure video call with Irene, Naomi, and 2 federal advisors from the Office of Transportation Oversight. This confirms what we suspected when Sky Nova refused to sign the accord outright, Naomi said. They weren't just avoiding accountability, they were protecting a structure. And that structure, Irene added, is actionable. The federal advisor leaned in. Miss Sinclair, I want to be very clear. You're not obligated to comment publicly. You've done more than enough. I know, Elodie said, but that's not why I'm here. There was a long pause. Then Naomi broke the silence. You want to go back? Elodie nodded. Gate 24. They arrived at LAX the next morning. This time, no security agent asked her for a secondary check. No one doubted she belonged. In fact, most of the TSA line paused when they saw her. A few whispered. One agent even mouthed a quiet, "Thank you." Naomi didn't say a word. She just stayed close. So did Irene. They walked through the terminal with a purpose that was both calm and unshakable. And when they reached Gate 24, Elodie stopped. It looked just as it had before. Same digital signage, same white tile, even the same green velvet seating in the corner, the one she'd cried into when Chloe mocked her accent. But now there was something new. A digital screen mounted next to the gate agent's desk. It read, Ethics Standard Live, monitored by Skyscan Compliance System. Passenger Dignity Index, active. A number glowed next to it. 9.210 beneath it, A note. Real-time compliance scores tracked via FAA passenger charter. Elodie let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. It was working. Not just for her, for everyone. Naomi put a hand on her shoulder. "We can leave now, if you want." But Elodie didn't want to. She walked slowly to the gate desk. The new agent was a younger man, maybe mid-20s, with a soft smile and clear eyes. His name tag read Ravi. He looked up as she approached, and he recognized her instantly. "You're Elodie," she said simply. He stood a little straighter. "It's an honor." She smiled. "I'm not here for a flight." "Of course. I'm just here to make sure the gate still knows what justice looks like." He nodded. Then, quietly, he reached down, pulled out a laminated card, and placed it on the counter. It read, "All guests deserve dignity. Ask, listen, respect." Elodie blinked. "Training material?" she asked. "New protocol," he said. "Every gate in the Accord network has to keep this visible at all times." She reached out and picked it up. It was laminated like a boarding pass, but it felt heavier, not in weight of meaning. She turned to Naomi. "I want to issue a statement," Elodie said. "Not for press, for passengers." Irene raised an eyebrow. "What do you want to say?" Elodie thought for a long time. Then finally, "I want to tell them they weren't imagining it. The ones who thought they were treated worse because they didn't look, sound, or act easy. They weren't wrong, and now the system says so." The statement went viral within hours. It was posted on the FAA's passenger charter page, but within minutes, screenshots flooded Reddit, Instagram, and Telltale's forums. The reactions were explosive. Some cried, some apologized. Some demanded their own stories be investigated. And many said something Elodie hadn't expected. "I didn't know I needed to hear that. I wasn't imagining it? You have no idea what that means. No more silence. No more shrinking." Suddenly, the Accord wasn't just a policy. It was a movement. And for the first time, the public wasn't demanding reform from airlines. They were demanding reform from airports, bus stations, ferry terminals. The ripple had become a wave. Elodie stayed up that night reading stories from strangers. One post stuck with her. A mother of a nonverbal child shared that after the Accord announcement, her son was able to board a flight for the first time without being questioned or stared at. She ended the post with 3 words. Elodie gave space. 3 days later, Skynova issued a full public apology. Not from a spokesperson, from the board. They admitted the internal bias structures had existed. They claimed they didn't know how far it had gone, but they promised to dismantle the system and announced a $30 million reparative ethics fund to retrain staff across all global locations. But for Elodie, that wasn't the finish line. She met with Congress that Friday. Behind closed doors, she handed over a policy memo Naomi helped draft. The Passenger Respect Infrastructure Act, a legislative framework that would require all federally supported airports to install a compliance feedback loop, mandate transparent ethics scoring on all digital boarding systems, fund cross-agency tracking of complaints tied to identity-based mistreatment. And at the bottom of that document was one signature line, initiated by Elodie Sinclair. The committee voted 12-1 to send it to the floor. The next week, Irene took Elodie back to Boston. The trip home was quiet. No fanfare, no interviews. Just Elodie in her window seat, looking out as the clouds parted and the city lights emerged. She didn't feel like a hero. She didn't want to, but she did feel heard. And for a girl who once cried at Gate 24, that was more than enough. Elodie never expected her name to show up in headlines again, at least not so soon. But by Monday morning, it was everywhere. Skynova ethics crisis sparks federal audit into 5 major airlines. The Sinclair Protocol. Elodie Sinclair's Accord now has teeth. Elodie, 12, is quietly rewriting global travel rules. Some praised her, Some questioned her, but nobody ignored her. And for the first time in weeks, the silence around what happened at Gate 24 was broken, not with apology, but with accountability. Still, not everyone was on board. At 6:42 a.m., Naomi called from Washington. "Elodie, stay off Twitter." "Too late," Naomi sighed. "They're stirring." "Which one?" "Global Wing, but United Jet's not far behind." That afternoon, Elodie sat in on a private Zoom call with Naomi, Irene, and a coalition of federal advisors now overseeing early implementation of the Passenger Ethics Accord. A legal rep from FAA pulled up a file. "They're calling it administrative overreach," he said. "Claim the Accord violates carrier autonomy, undermines ticketing discretion." "Discretion to do what?" Irene asked. "Gatekeep dignity?" The FAA rep didn't answer directly. "They're building a block coalition. We think they're trying to stall deployment across 6 major terminals: London, Frankfurt, Sydney, DC, Toronto, and LAX. Naomi's voice dropped cold. "That's nearly 40% of outbound international flights. And 71% of ethics complaints historically," Elodie added. She knew the numbers by heart now. Irene turned to Elodie. "If they stall at LAX, they're coming for the rest." Naomi nodded. "It's a message. They want to see if Elodie will back down." Elodie didn't flinch. "Then we send one back." That night, a closed-door team gathered at Naomi's Georgetown office. It wasn't just FAA anymore. It was Sky Shure, DOT, members of the House Ethics Committee, and quietly, 2 senior advisors from the Department of Justice. They laid it all out. Skynova's internal documents weren't isolated. HarmonyNet had been shared, sold, used as a behavioral pre-screening filter by 3 other carriers, under different names: PackStream, GlideIQ, and InterSync. Each program scored passengers using a quiet algorithm, one trained on years of biased customer service data. The scoring affected seat reassignments, upgrade access, delay, compensation, flagging passengers for secondary screening. And the worst part? None of it had been disclosed. It was all buried under the clause, Service Optimization Protocol. By the end of the meeting, Naomi stood. "This isn't about gate agents anymore. This is surveillance." She looked at Elodie. "You don't just have public sympathy, you have policy leverage." Elodie's voice was steady. "Then let's pull it." 2 days later, Naomi appeared on 60 Minutes. She didn't go alone. Elodie sat next to her. Irene joined virtually from Boston. The interviewer leaned in. "Some say a 12-year-old shouldn't be at the center of federal policy shifts. That this is too much weight to carry." Elodie didn't blink. "Then maybe someone older should have stopped it first." The clip went viral overnight. But it wasn't just the media Elodie had to worry about. That week, anonymous accounts posted deep-fake videos claiming Elodie had faked her accent, had staged the incident at LAX, had lied about her mother's role in Skyscan's ethics system. They weren't real, but they spread. TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, millions of views. And suddenly, Elodie wasn't just a figure of reform. She was a target. Naomi brought in a digital protection team. Irene flew to DC immediately, but when they entered Elodie's hotel room, she wasn't crying. She was at the desk, coding. "Elodie," Naomi said, stunned. "What are you doing?" Elodie looked up. "Building a tool." "For what?" "To verify passenger complaints across all platforms using Skyscan input. No more he said, she said. No more silence, just data." Naomi stared at her. "You're 12. "I'm also done waiting." Within 72 hours, Elodie's tool, nicknamed Fair Flag, was deployed across 11 airports. It wasn't just tracking complaints anymore. It mapped them, visualized them, showed spikes where ethics violations surged, by time of day, terminal, even agent ID number. And for the first time, airports saw their own bias in real time. Passengers could see it too, Flight agents started asking questions. Managers started resigning. And Sky Nova? They went silent. Until Friday morning. That's when the real punch landed. FAA issued a formal directive. Any airline or terminal found not cooperating with Accord protocols, especially those manipulating behavior-based passenger tracking, would face immediate loss of federal operating certifications, suspension of partner access with U.S.-based routes, investigation under the Transportation Bias Act, a statute rarely used but now weaponized. Elodie watched the press conference from a hotel's sofa. She didn't speak, didn't smile, just watched. When the FAA spokesperson finished reading, he added, "This policy wouldn't exist without a young girl from Boston who refused to be quiet. Her name is Elodie, and today we follow her lead." The room erupted in flashbulbs, and on screen, Elodie's face stayed still. But her hand, it curled into a small, quiet fist. That night, Irene found Elodie staring at the stars from the hotel balcony. "You did something most people never do," she said softly. "What?" "You pushed the world to admit it was wrong." Elodie didn't answer right away. Then she looked up. "Do you think she'd be proud of me?" Irene blinked. "Your mom?" Elodie nodded. "I know she would," Irene said. "And not because of Skyscan, but because you didn't use her name as a shield. You earned your own." Elodie let the tears come. No cameras, no hashtags, just the sound of her breathing and the lights of DC flickering below. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. Elodie hadn't said much all morning. She sat silently in the back seat of the black sedan as it rolled past the monuments of Washington, D.C. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, fingers fidgeting slightly with the edge of her sleeve. Beside her, Irene kept a protective eye, occasionally glancing down at her phone to check the schedule. The car was headed for the FAA headquarters, where the public ethics hearing was about to begin. Outside the tinted window, protesters were already gathering. Some held signs that said, "Let her speak," and "Passengers deserve dignity." Others wore pins with Elodie's name on them. A few even held photos of their own children, some smiling, some not. "Elodie," Irene said gently, "you don't have to speak if you're not ready. Naomi will do the formal remarks." But Elodie didn't flinch. Her eyes remained on the protesters outside. "I want to listen first," she said. "Then I'll know what needs to be said." When they arrived at the FAA building, cameras clicked instantly. A wall of reporters leaned over barriers, shouting questions. "Elodie, will you testify today? Do you believe the system is changing fast enough? Do you forgive Sky Nova?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her presence was the answer. Inside the hearing chamber, the energy shifted. The room wasn't massive, but it was packed with power. Representatives from 6 federal oversight bodies, lawyers from 4 airline corporations, a small cluster of advocates, researchers, and survivors of past abuse. And Elodie, the 12-year-old girl who had flipped the entire aviation industry on its head just by pressing 2 buttons and speaking clearly in her own voice. The lead FAA Commissioner, Paul Hensley, opened the session. "This hearing," he said, "is not about one airline, one policy, or one girl. This hearing is about a system that failed to protect its passengers and the consequences that follow." From the second row, Naomi gave Elodie a soft nudge. "She's not just a girl," Naomi whispered. "She's the one who built the tool that caught them." Elodie gave a barely there smile. The hearing started with testimony from Sky Nova's chief ethics officer. His voice was shaky, carefully rehearsed. He denied direct knowledge of HarmonyNet's unethical functions, deflecting blame to external contractors and miscommunication. But Naomi wasn't having it. When it was her turn, she stood with the quiet force of a storm. "Let's be clear," she began. "Sky Nova's system didn't accidentally rank passengers by their accents. It didn't accidentally downgrade Elodie's seat, and it didn't accidentally train staff to deny boarding to non-standard speakers. These were calculated, programmed, approved. Then came the whistleblowers. A former IT consultant broke down how HarmonyNet's scoring model weighted standardized American intonation higher than regional or immigrant-accented English. A gate agent shared training slides with built-in bias flags. If a traveler spoke too slowly or hesitated while responding, their behavior was flagged as escalation risk. It wasn't just wrong, it was systemic. Elodie listened carefully to every word, taking notes in her journal. Then, unexpectedly, Hensley called on her. "Miss Elodie Sinclair," he said, "we recognize your contribution to this moment. If you have anything to share, the floor is yours." The room fell quiet. Irene touched her arm gently. "You don't have to," but Elodie had already stood. She walked to the front with a calmness that didn't match her age and pulled the mic down to her height. "My name is Elodie," she said softly, "and I wasn't supposed to have a voice in this room." She looked across the sea of suits, then into the cameras. "I'm 12. I have autism, and sometimes people don't understand how I speak. But that's not a reason to treat someone like they don't belong." She paused, then added, "I didn't build Skyscan to punish anyone. I built it because I thought passengers should be treated fairly, no matter how they sound." A murmur moved through the chamber. "I didn't want to become the story," she said. "But now that I am, I'm going to finish it." She returned to her seat without another word. Nobody spoke for almost 10 seconds. Then a slow ripple of applause started at the back of the room and spread. Chairman Hensley nodded. "Thank you, Miss Sinclair. Your words have weight." What followed was swift. Within the next 24 hours, the FAA announced an emergency ethics review of all major carriers. 3 U.S. airports temporarily revoked Skynova's landing privileges. 3 international hubs, Heathrow, Charles de Gaulle, and Narita, announced pending suspensions, pending compliance audits. Skynova's market cap dropped by $740 million. More importantly, the Passenger Ethics Accord, which had sat stalled for over a year, was formally adopted with unanimous support. And at the center of it all, Elodie, the girl who spoke softly, but was no longer ignored. That night, back at the hotel, Elodie sat on the floor beside the bed, reading letters from strangers who had seen the broadcast. One said, "I never thought anyone would stand up for the way I speak." Another, "You reminded me that our stories matter. Thank you." Elodie didn't cry, but she did smile. She turned to Irene. "Do you think people will forget this?" Irene shook her head. "No, sweetheart, not this time. Have you ever been dismissed for how you sound or where you're from? Tell us where you're watching from. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear." The room smelled like lemon-scented whiteboards and hot printers. Not exactly the setting one would expect for a revolution. But for Elodie Sinclair, this room, tucked inside an anonymous office suite in downtown D.C., was the birthplace of something much bigger than herself. 6 days had passed since the FAA hearing. In those 6 days, 4 airline CEOs had issued public apologies. 3 ethics officers had resigned, and Skynova's board had entered emergency talks to avoid delisting from 2 international exchanges. But Elodie wasn't focused on apologies. She was focused on architecture, of change. She sat cross-legged on a swivel chair, sketching with a red dry erase marker on a whiteboard nearly twice her height. Naomi watched from the side, phone in hand, not interrupting. She'd learned by now. When Elodie got into this state, silent, flowing, exact, you let her build. Passenger experience flows are linear, Elodie muttered to herself. But violations aren't. They spike. They scatter. We need a map that captures ethical turbulence, not just technical. She circled a section labeled Tone Triage Protocol and drew a line connecting it to another. Accent Flag Review Threshold. Naomi finally stepped closer. You're turning Skyscan into a living feedback loop. Elodie didn't look up. The system caught the problem last time. Now it needs to anticipate it. Naomi smiled. You're 12. You realize that, right? I'm 12, Elodie said. but they ignored me until it cost them $900 million. Point taken. By mid-morning, the room filled with more people. An FAA liaison joined them first, then 2 behavioral science researchers, then a software engineer who had once worked on HarmonyNet, but quit in protest. Elodie didn't flinch. She briefed them all like a miniature executive. "We're redesigning how airlines assess behavior in real time," she said. "Not with surveillance, with ethics." A man from the Department of Transportation raised his hand. "Elodie, even if we build this, how do we make them use it?" Naomi answered for her. "We won't ask." She pulled up a document on the screen titled Passenger Ethics Accord, Phase 2 Implementation Blueprint. "By next quarter," Naomi said, "any airline that wants to keep U.S. federal airspace certification will need to meet Elodie's standards." The room went silent. One of the behavioral scientists blinked. "Wait, the FAA is adopting this?" Naomi smiled. "They're adopting her." Back home in Raleigh, Elodie's old classmates had started a hashtag. "We speak like Elodie." It wasn't trending on TikTok. It wasn't supposed to. This movement wasn't built on flash. It was built on friction. And friction spreads in real life. One quiet kid, one ignored accent, one tiny act of defiance at a time. But some changes moved faster than expected. By the end of the week, 3 major airlines voluntarily suspended the use of speech-based passenger profiling. 2 new accessibility standards were published, requiring all U.S. flight crew to complete perceptual bias recognition training. And the International Flight Consortium, IFC, invited Elodie to present Skyscan 2.0 at their upcoming summit in Geneva. The world was listening, but Elodie remained grounded, literally. She hadn't flown since the day of the incident. Even now, the thought of boarding a plane made her chest tighten. Irene noticed it too. One afternoon, she found Elodie sitting on the living room floor, backpack half packed. "Hey," Irene said, crouching down. "We don't have to go if you're not ready." Elodie didn't answer. She just stared at the boarding pass in her hand. Geneva. A long flight. Far away. And yet, "I need to see them read it," she said. Irene furrowed her brow. "Read what?" Elodie looked up. "The new protocol. I need to see them scan my name and not flinch." The flight to Geneva was surreal. Not because of the view, but because of the crew. When Elodie boarded, the flight attendant smiled and bent down to her level. "Hi, Elodie. I read your white paper. I even wrote a post about it. What Skyscan taught me about listening. May I help you with your bag?" Elodie blinked, then nodded. "Thanks." She didn't smile. She was still watching, still measuring. They gave her a quiet window seat. No extra attention, just dignity. That was the point. The Geneva Summit Hall was a minimalist cathedral of glass and light. Elodie's chair was comically oversized, but no one laughed. The panel moderator introduced her as the architect behind the world's first passenger-facing aviation ethics protocol. She walked up slowly, clicker in one hand, lanyard swaying. Behind her, the screen lit up. The Passenger Ethics Charter, Beyond Compliance. She didn't say much, just enough. "We built planes to move people," she began. "But somewhere along the way, we started ranking them. Not by seat number, but by how they speak, where they're from, how long they pause before answering." She looked straight at the CEOs seated in the front row. Every data point is a decision. Every silence is a policy. The silence in the room now? Heavy, reflective, real. "And if the system only listens to power," she said, "then it's my job to give power a new sound." When she finished, there wasn't a standing ovation. There was something better. A line of airline executives waiting to shake her hand. Not for the photo, but because they'd just signed a new agreement. Passenger Ethics Charter, Global Edition, effective immediately. Back in Raleigh, her old elementary school held an assembly. They played clips from the Geneva Summit, gave her a plaque. But Elodie skipped the applause. She spent the afternoon with her cat, Lucy, coding a new plugin for Skyscan, something that detected when passengers were interrupted too often by crew. Because fairness wasn't a project, it was a pattern, and she wasn't done building, not even close. Elodie Sinclair hadn't spoken in 12 minutes. She didn't need to. Inside the Federal Aviation Summit Chamber in Washington, D.C., her silence echoed louder than the murmurs of journalists, louder than the typing of press aides. The only sound in the room came from the soft hum of a real-time projection screen, displaying the live compliance scores of every major U.S. airline. On that screen, 3 airlines had just turned red. Non-compliant, the label read. The moment the new Passenger Fairness Index went live, their systems failed to meet the ethical threshold. The reaction? Immediate. Executives from all 3 companies stood up. One tried to argue, another tried to explain, but none of them could talk over the fact that the FAA had already initiated partial flight suspensions for their national routes. It was happening. Elodie wasn't just building tools anymore. She was triggering consequences. Backstage, Naomi gently leaned down beside Elodie, adjusting the small mic clipped to her blazer. "You good?" Elodie nodded, eyes focused. "It's time." She stepped onto the stage, not to make a speech, but to activate a shift. Behind her, the screen read, "Passenger Fairness Index, full national rollout, live in 5, 4, 3. And when the timer hit 0, the landscape of U.S. aviation changed forever. The Fairness Index wasn't just a number. It was a real-time scoring protocol, visible to both government regulators and passenger advocacy coalitions. Every action taken by flight crews, from boarding procedures to how they addressed complaints, was logged, coded, and ethically weighted. Each airline received a dynamic ethics score that updated every 15 minutes. Drop below a certain threshold? 3 things happened instantly. Access to FAA flight clearance systems was temporarily limited. Ongoing credits and subsidies from federal travel programs were suspended. Passenger alerts were sent out through verified booking partners, warning them of elevated risk factors. It wasn't just a system, it was a message. Ethics is infrastructure. Elodie didn't take credit. In fact, she avoided most of the post-launch interviews, but her name was already everywhere, from industry newsletters to legal journals, because alongside the index, a secondary protocol had also gone live, the Sinclair Clause. Drafted in quiet partnership with Naomi and 2 federal ethics advisors, the clause tied compliance scores to insurance eligibility, international route licensing, and eligibility for federal expansion grants. Simply put, if you didn't play fair, you didn't fly far. 3 days after launch, 5 things happened. Skynova lost its contract with the Northeast Education Travel Program. Altara Wings had its clearance for flights over the Pacific suspended for 48 hours. A federal court opened an inquiry. 3 prior passenger removal cases based on new analytics flagged by the index. 2 major booking platforms delisted airlines that refused to sign the charter, and the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, issued a statement endorsing the index as a leading example of ethics-forward aviation modernization. In short, the system had teeth, but it also had heart. Back in Raleigh, Irene received a call from a woman with a soft Irish accent. "My daughter stutters," she said. "Your girl made her feel powerful." She wasn't the only one. In a matter of weeks, schools across the U.S. began using Elodie's story as part of their digital literacy curriculum. Civic platforms used her work to teach bias awareness. Airline HR departments implemented accent equity training as mandatory. The thing about a 12-year-old reshaping national policy, it makes every quiet kid feel like a walking pressure point. Elodie kept working. Late one night, she stared at a heat map generated by the index. Red clusters surrounded major cities. Yellow pulses appeared in mid-range hubs. But something stood out. Tiny green dots, scattered across small airports. Rural, ignored, understaffed, yet consistently above threshold. "Look at this," she told Naomi. The small ones, they're doing better. Naomi peered over. You think they're under less pressure? I think they're under more, Elodie said. And they're still choosing better. A month after launch, the Senate held a hearing, not to investigate, but to adopt. Elodie sat between Naomi and an ethics chair from MIT. Senator Caro leaned in. Miss Sinclair, do you believe ethical compliance should become a condition for international airspace agreements? Elodie looked him straight in the eye. I don't believe it. I know it. That answer made headlines. But what changed the future was what came next. The FAA officially passed the Passenger Fairness Charter, an industry-wide ethics agreement modeled on Elodie's system, signed by 87 airlines across 32 countries, effective immediately. In Geneva, the International Passenger Rights Convention awarded Elodie the first-ever Ethics Systems Innovation Medal. But she didn't attend the ceremony. Instead, she sent a recorded message. We didn't build Skyscan to punish. We built it so people could be seen, before they had to shout. I speak differently. That's my data point. You have one too. Don't erase it. Make it count. One final twist came when a major airline, Clearwings International, approached Naomi with an offer. Not to buy the system, but to license it permanently, embedded into their planes, and co-develop bias-aware cabin interfaces with Elodie as technical advisor. Elodie declined the board seat, but she accepted something else. A test flight. The plane lifted gently over the Atlantic. Elodie stared out the window as the ocean shimmered in the moonlight. Irene sat next to her, holding her hand. There was no first class, no announcements that made her flinch. Just a single flight crew member who walked up and said, Hi, Miss Sinclair. You've made flying safer, for all of us. Elodie smiled softly, and for the first time in weeks, she spoke aloud. Not safer, just fair. And with that, the cabin lights dimmed. The flight continued, and the world, quietly, got better. Elodie walked through the front doors of the small library in Raleigh, North Carolina, where it all began. It wasn't grand. No marble steps, no gilded ceilings, just that soft hum of dusty lights above wooden shelves, and that same uneven squeak in the floor near the circulation desk she remembered from 2 years ago. This was where she and Irene had first huddled in silence, poring over FAA regulations, ethics codes, user manuals, and frustration. A place where no one interrupted when Elodie needed 5 minutes to form a sentence, where her pauses weren't met with sighs or glances, but space. Today, it looked a little different. A small bronze plaque had been added near the entrance, in honor of Elodie Sinclair, for proving that ethics can fly. She stood in front of it, not quite touching it, just letting it exist, like she'd let herself exist. She didn't need a speech. She just needed a quiet moment to believe it was real. The world, by now, had caught up. The Passenger Fairness Index was integrated into over 6% of global airlines. 3 major governments had adopted parts of her bias detection system for public transportation, and her data protocols had been requested by multiple international ethics committees for review. But Elodie wasn't counting stats. She was counting moments, like the one where a 9-year-old girl in Munich with a cleft palate wrote to her saying, I don't feel weird anymore when I talk. Or when a flight attendant training manual in Brazil included her story as the opening chapter. Or when Irene had looked at her one night and said simply, I'm proud of how you used your voice, even when you didn't. At school, some kids still didn't get it. Some still whispered, why doesn't she just talk normally? And Elodie would still sometimes walk away, shoulders a little tight, breathing short. But she never walked away small, because now she knew her silence wasn't absence, it was intention. A few months after the full FAA rollout, Elodie received an invitation she hadn't expected. A private summit in Montreal, not for engineers, not for regulators, but for students. Young people between 12 and 16 who had been bullied for their accents, mocked for disabilities, or silenced in classrooms. The event was themed, Different Speaks. Elodie didn't prepare a keynote. She prepared a room, a quiet one. No podium, no lights, just cushions and whiteboards and a rule. You speak how you need. Some kids used sign language, some whispered, some just drew. And one by one, they shared data they'd been collecting, not numbers, but feelings. How it felt when a teacher interrupted. How it felt when an airline gate agent mimicked their stutter. How it felt when their silence was treated like incompetence. It wasn't official, but it was powerful. And that night, Elodie sat in the center of the room, arms wrapped around her knees, and realized this was the system she'd always wanted to build. Back in D.C., lawmakers had started calling her the quiet architect. Journalists called her a prodigy. But Elodie didn't like either. She liked listener. That was enough. One morning, she and Naomi stood on the tarmac of a new terminal being beta tested in Denver. It was the first to be fully ethics integrated, with real-time passenger dignity ratings and a multilingual biometric welcome interface. The lead engineer asked her, "What should we name the AI that powers the cabin interface?" Naomi turned to Elodie. Elodie blinked. Then slowly, she said, "Name it Irene." The woman who gave her shelter, space, and patience deserved to fly with every passenger, every time. In the final days of the year, Naomi released a report on behalf of Ethos Core. It tracked behavioral shifts in 47,000 cabin crew members after the adoption of the Passenger Fairness Index. Incidents of accent discrimination dropped by 61%. Unjustified seat reassignments dropped by 48%. Verbal misconduct complaints dropped by 73%, but more telling than all of it, passenger compliments had gone up 210%. Because when people are seen, really seen, they give more than outrage. They give kindness. One last scene. It was dusk. Winter. A quiet airport lounge in Helsinki. Snow pattering against wide glass windows. Elodie sat by the window with a warm drink. She watched as a young boy with a speech impediment slowly checked in with a gate agent. His voice trembled, hands twitching. The agent smiled, knelt to eye level, and softly said, "Take your time." Elodie exhaled through her nose, a tiny smile playing on her lips. It worked. No systems buzzed, no red flags, no cameras needed. Just dignity. It was quiet, but in her bones, she knew. That's the loudest victory of all. If you've made it this far, what would you have done if you were Elodie? Would you have stayed silent or spoken out? Tell us where you're watching from, and more importantly, tell us what justice looks like to you. Because sometimes the quietest voices rewrite the loudest systems.